Everyone, welcome to another episode of Honesty Hour, a Boulder Pride special. Here, we sit down and talk about real stories of our LGBTQ team members. I'm your host, Jays, and for today's episode, we are joined by one of the most awesome people I know at Boulder, our very own impact manager, my former manager, Glow. Today, she's going to share her experience in navigating faith and religion as an LGBTQ and how this experience has shaped her view about how faith and gender identity can possibly coexist. Glow, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thanks for having me, Jace. I'm good. I'm excited to share my story. This is the first time I'm actually publicly sharing my story, so I'm a little nervous, but yeah, let's let's get the ball rolling.
Thank you for sharing your story for the first time with us. Actually, it's a big honor. And this topic that we are going to explore is also a bit new to me because we don't get to usually talk about this sometimes, or most of the time, we tend to separate these two aspects of our lives, right? And it's good to have a very refreshing view or perspective of these two things and how they intersect, coexist, right? Especially shaping you from the moment that you were growing up until the moment that you have come into terms with your own sexuality, Glow. So you have had a typical religious upbringing, and obviously this shaped your experience as an LGBTQ. And we all know that you have a very religious background from the past. There were a lot of choices, or should we say, lifestyle choices that you made, which were frowned upon because they were not conventional, they were subversive, they challenged the divide between faith and sexuality. So I'm really curious to know, Glow, and even though you're my former manager, we don't really didn't get to talk about this, right? But how come or how did you come into terms with your gender identity growing up in a religious environment?
Sure. I think a lot of the folks who have grown up in a similar context can say that it's a lot of hiding. Um, it's a lot of yeah, it's a lot of pretending, and it's practically juggling a double life, or as they call it, a double life. Um, I think when I had a realization that first and foremost my agency, or how I was determining my own sort of identity, had a lot to do with what people were saying or how they perceived it should be in the context of church or in the context of faith. That my say had nothing to do with it at the time. I felt like, there was a turning point in my 20 my early 20s thereabouts, when I started realizing that my own context matters too. um, when you grow up in an environment where you sort of are just told how things should be, you kind of look for an opportunity, or you kind of start thinking later on, well, what about how I really feel like it should be, or what about me? What about my input or my personal sort of stake in this? Does it even matter? At the end of the day, am I not just accountable to myself? All the folks, all the people who do set these expectations, these rules, they don't know me at the end of the day. So, like, what I started to think, well, I don't have a responsibility to, you know, to make sure that I'm following their rules. So, it was a process. I think, in many words, I'm saying it was a process of sort of detaching from what I knew, or what was learned behavior, versus what I've started to adapt as my own, or at least come into my own. So that was my process. And again, sexuality is just a part of it. This includes so many other choices or lifestyle choices, but ultimately the core of my realization was my own agency and my own accountability and responsibility to myself. There.
Well, thank you. Wonderful answer, Glow. Well, I just wanted to repeat what you've said, that coming into terms has been a process for you, and sexuality is just an aspect of it. And when we talk about coming into terms, it's not tantamount to saying it's all about sexuality, right? Because your context matters, and you have
Mm,
a lot of context that you're dealing with right now, not just sexuality, but also the other aspects, the other forms of your life: work, friends, social life, your
right.
emotional well-being, your physical welfare, especially amidst the pandemic.
Yeah.
And after all this processes that you have undergone, you have realized that appreciating your own context is like validating your authenticity. And
Yep.
there may have been a lot of remarks, comments from other people telling you otherwise, telling you to be like this, telling you to fit in because it's, they dictate the rules, the so-called rules. But after all, you've come to terms with yourself that your own happiness, your own concept or definition of love matters. But one of your, let's say, fellow community members once told you that you should date a male, I suppose, a male
Yeah.
community member,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
from your faith group. But
Mm.
aside from that, what were the most or what were the worst remarks or comments that you heard from these people as you slowly embrace your identity?
That's a great question. And the interesting thing is, these are remarks that a lot of people of faith tend to say, even if their intention is even if they're well-meaning, even if they're sincere, they could be sincerely offensive. One of the things that I remember was, so they think it's a phase. Sometimes they think it's a phase. Um, in this situation, this person said, "Don't take too long." Okay, it's like I have some kind of timeline. Oh, timeline. That's another thing. As I was slowly distancing myself rather from the community, I started to sort of brief some of my friends that I'm going to be taking a break. I need to find myself or whatever. I was just throwing out whatever excuse, but in truth, I just really wanted um, to get away. And yeah, those are the responses that I felt like were invalidating, because for them all that mattered was, oh, when are you coming back? What's your timeline? Don't take too long, or yeah, stuff like, like in at first blush we don't really think it's offensive because it's not directed at your choice, but for me, what that the message that sends is, yeah, sure, do whatever you need to do. Just make sure you come back. That's not even the point of this process. It's, you know, I mean, just never come back to begin with. I mean, and it's statements like these that confirm or validate my decision, because at the end of the day, it felt like what mattered the most was that I got back in line. Okay, take a break, take a sabbatical, take an LOA, from this. It's fine, find yourself, whatever. Not realizing that that's not, this is not something that you just, oh, I traveled and then I realized the error of my ways, so now I'm back. I feel like that's the template sort of story that they were expecting. And yeah, I just didn't resonate with me so much, and it didn't feel accepting. It just felt like, um, okay, sure, yeah, you're going through a phase. Just let us know when you'll be back.
Yeah, they were asking you to hurry up, though. You were
Yeah.
pressured at the same time, you felt invalidated, you
Mhm.
were hurt, you were labeled, you were told to fit
Mhm.
in this cookie cutter mold that they were trying to envision for you. What they're
Yeah.
saying that the fate was trying to envision for you, the fate
Mhm.
that you once subscribed in. But aside from invalidation, pressure, hurt, labeling, aside from those, how did these judgments affect you back then?
I think it confirmed a suspicion, a long-standing suspicion in the back of my head, that I wonder if these people really cared about me. Like, are they really sincere about the relationship they want to build with me, or are they just concerned about keeping people in church or keeping people in line? I think it just exposed a motive that they must have had, you know, and it makes you question whether they were really your friends or not. So that was the biggest impact to me. Of course, my stance is I don't expect you to agree. I don't, this is your own sort of, you're going through your own process. You have your reasons for not doing so. But I think the hurtful part of it is, but we were friends, and it feels like you've made this the defining or the turning point for our friendship. And I'm more than that. Yes, this is
Yeah.
this is what I'm coming into, but again, as I've mentioned, identity is just more than your sexuality. And yet they chose to zero in on that aspect of me. Um, that doesn't sit well with them, I suppose, and I guess that just sort of defined everything. So for me, I'm like, I just don't believe in, um, when people say, "I love you, but not this part." You either love a person or you don't. You don't love them 70% and then 30% you don't. You know what I mean? That doesn't
Yeah.
that
It's
doesn't make
conditional.
sense. Yeah,
If we're talking
like
about faith, love should be unconditional, right? You are more than that. You are more than your sexuality, your identity. You
thank
have
you,
your own context, right? And in that context alone, it's not just comprised of your sexuality, your identity. I mean, Glow is more than that, right? I know you as a
thank you,
person. I know you as a colleague, my former manager. I've known you for a lot of other aspects aside from being Glow, right?
thank you.
So that has been quite a process for you, Glow. But we could say that it has been a pivotal experience for you,
Absolutely.
coming into terms with your faith and your gender identity. And
Mhm.
you went to a Bible school for 4 years, right?
Yes, yes, I did.
Circling back to your answer of questioning, when you had started to go to a Bible school and when you've spent your life there for 4 years, that has become an opportunity for you to inquire, to
Mhm.
meditate, to gain awareness about your experience, right? And you, after all your experiences, after all of these judgments that have propelled you to where you are right now, you have realized that faith and gender, after all, are not different, or can intersect. They can at some point arrive uh at one goal, at one path where you can traverse, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So my question for you is, can you share more about your experience as a religious person and as an LGBTQ at the same time?
At this point, I don't consider myself a religious person in the strict sense, meaning I don't go to church. I don't affiliate um, with any organization. I mean, I don't affiliate with any religious organization. Um, but in there is a process that most church folk go through called deconstruction. I know that's a lot, but basically it means sort of taking your faith apart and making it your own. It's been great because there's so many of us, Jace. There's so many. Like it's easy. It's so interesting when you're about to sort of exit the community. Of course, a lot of people are there are mixed responses. People would say, some people are like, oh, okay, but we're just here for you, no matter what. And those people I kept as my friends. There were a couple who I think secretly they sort of expect your life to fall apart. So in this process of deconstruction, I've managed to take parts of my faith, of parts of whatever I've studied in 4 years, whatever I've grown up with, and sort of decide that this is going to be what I'm going to add to my belief system that is my own. It's not something that was taught to me. It's not something that some person in the pulpit said it should be this way and this way only. This is something that I, can say that this is what I truly believe in. A lot of people tend to see God or faith in dichotomies as something binary. They say, oh, God created day and night. Uh, land and water, or his land and sea, something like that. But what people don't realize is life is a spectrum. There's day, there's dusk, there's dawn. You know what I mean? And there's like afternoon. So it's not literally like, you know what I mean? It's a spectrum. So And the same with, land and water. You have swamps, you have marshes, you have everything in between. And I think it's getting out of this very simplistic perspective of, of God, that if you really think about it, no one, no one, it's not, you really can't trace where this whole, either or thinking has come from. But when you look at life, it really is a whole shade of so many things. And I
And it's
think that,
colorful.
yeah, and life is a spectrum. It's not black or white. Everything is, you can like a person but also be irritated with them. You're allowed to have two emotions
Exactly.
at the same time. You're allowed to love your job and then sometimes feel stressed out. Like, it's, what I mean, if we lived in like binaries, then life would be so boring.
And what I like about what you said, Chloe, is that life is a spectrum, and then everything that exists occurs in it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive,
Mhm.
right? Just like faith and gender identity, sexuality. It is a rainbow, just like my background, which is one of Boulder's spiritual backgrounds. It is a rainbow, but although rainbow has 7 colors, it doesn't have to be like that. I
Mhm.
mean, it is colorful after all. And I like that you said that taking your faith apart and making it your own has been your process. You've come or you've reached that point that you are fully aware, fully cognizant of who you are and what you believe in, to the point that you're able to subvert your belief and make it
Yep.
your own. But despite those realizations, of course, we were once challenged, right?
Mhm.
We've had these beautiful ideas, concepts, because they were forged over time by challenges. And speaking of challenges, what were the challenges, or what's the most challenging part that you've encountered along the way?
It's trying to bring people who I thought were my friends along for my journey. That for me was the most painful, because you know um, there are just people who won't understand, and people who don't want to see life in a spectrum. That's just how it is. Yeah, for them, their frame of mind is just, and that's for me. I just had to learn how to accept that. I didn't see the point of exposing myself to people who don't understand. It's not my job to make them understand. I've said my piece. I've said that this is who I am, and if they don't not willing to accept that, I'm not gonna be. I mean, I'm gonna be sad, but that's it. That's
Yes,
that's a
I know.
decision that they've made,
Mhm.
and that's just how it is. Yeah, and I don't recall talking to anyone who are like, oh, this is a terrible decision. I'm gonna go back. Like, you know what I mean? Like, reverse. Maybe there
Yes.
are some, and that's their story and their process. But
Mhm.
from my memory, I don't know anyone who's left. You know, come into their own and then decided, oh, that's not working for me. So I mean, so yeah. I'll let you know if I meet anyone. But so far, I
Yeah,
don't
but
know anyone.
Glow, I'm happy that you're happier now.
Thank you.
You've had great lessons from these
Mm.
experiences, right? You've come into terms with your faith, your gender identity.
Mm.
But right now, yes, we all know that you're happier now, but how would you describe your status when it comes to your faith?
Good question. I still believe in God. I think and sincerely believe that He loves me. I don't think there are any strings attached to that. I don't think He wants to change me. Um, I don't think. um, I don't think it's changed like His or there. I mean, obviously, like there's so many. Oh, I've been in so many of these deconstructing
Yeah.
circles that they're like, God has no gender, and I believe that. Obviously, come on, He's like beyond. So
Or
yeah,
God is a woman, according to Ariana Grande.
yeah, exactly, right? It could be, yeah. Or that um yeah. I just sincerely believe that there are no strings attached to that love. That is the epitome of what unconditional love is. And I just feel like it's life is just much better to see. people through a lens of love. And I honestly believe, stripped of all the form and pomp and circumstance and structure or whatever man-made, you know, system that that we know now to be church, and you just sort of go back to basics and really hone in on what you believe God is. If you really believe that God is love, then and
So be
that's
it.
what's, yeah, and no one can be like, no, it's not. Okay,
The thing is,
Karen, the joke.
they're
Yeah,
expecting you to be someone you're not, and
yeah,
that's not you. When you fit in, when you compromise, when you adjust, that's no longer
yeah,
you. And
yeah.
if we do that, we're no longer authentic. And I just wanted to
Absolutely.
share that in our last episode, our guest was Mitzi, and she shared the joys and the triumphs and the challenges of being not just an LGBT parent, but a parent in the Philippine society. She
Amazing.
has also had a lot of questions, and that's something that's trending, or the trend in the two interviews that I've had with you. You ask questions, you're not afraid, right? You question, challenge, you subvert. And there are a lot of viewers right now, there are a lot of children, a lot of teenagers, I mean, from all from all age groups, from all walks of life. They wanted to ask questions, but they are silenced. They are not vocal. It is a rampant issue in our society right now. You're seeing on the news, on the internet, on Twitter, wherever you
Mm,
are, right?
mm.
Faith, sexuality. So, what would be, based on your experiences that you've shared with us today, what would be your what would be your advice to all those members of the LGBTQ community, the straight allies, and also our friends in general? We're having the same dilemma right now.
Number one, it's know that you don't have to explain yourself to anyone. You don't have to apologize for who you are. Um, you're not a mistake. You only apologize for a mistake. So many people I know, they when especially when they're coming into their own in a place that is not accepting, the stance that they take is apologetic. And then they feel like they don't belong just because they're not in a place that makes them feel that they belong. Um, so that's a first mindset shift. I wish we all had. We don't owe anyone an explanation. We don't owe anyone, a reason. We don't even owe anyone an like we don't need to change their mind or like it's not our job to change our mind. So um, just like rid yourself of the burden of having to, you know, of the phrase, what will this person say? Because at the end of the day, all that matters is what you say about yourself and the people who love you. The second thing is, um, take your time. There's no rush. If there are logistical considerations to your coming out or your, you know, um, to your situation, it's okay to consider those, especially if you're in a hostile environment. Take like your safety is important, and often sometimes the level of acceptance is tied to, it puts a person at risk. So you
Mm.
know come into your own, but be wise about it in terms of your safety, not just physically but also emotionally, mentally.
Thank you, Glow. Yeah. You don't have to feel like you have to explain yourself. That's number one. Take your time and make your faith your own.
Mhm.
I guess heading to this interview, we were told that we were supposed to discuss the intersection of faith and your gender identity and how you have come to terms with both, right?
Mhm.
Creating safe spaces for yourself to accept yourself for who you are, for giving yourself some time, some space to ask questions, and just owning your faith, being you. But I guess that what has come as a result after this interview is that You share the story of how authentic you are, a story of your authenticity, your context, and a story of just focusing on yourself, your challenges, your realizations, your learning experiences, and that those aspects or those components have validated your own self context.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I do agree that life is a spectrum. I'm happy that you're able to see it that way because a lot of people until now are still struggling to see it at that point, right? For them, it's always black and white. But at the end of the day, just don't have to be pressured because we have our own time, our own progress, our own pace. We learn
Mhm.
on our own. And speaking of learning, a lot of people, a lot of Polderians, a lot of our viewers right now would like to learn about your honesty statement. Because before we wrap up officially today's interview, we would like you to share your honesty statement based on our conversation today, Glow. So, what honesty statement would you like to tell the world or the universe rather about your experience?
It's fairly simple. It's that you are enough. You may be a work in progress. Again, you don't have to explain yourself. You're accountable to yourself. The people who matter and care will stay, and the people who don't understand, maybe they'll have their own time. But for now, focus on just that you're enough, um, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. And everything else is gonna follow. It's really hard um, to give love when there's nothing that you can give to yourself. It's like the oxygen mask metaphor. So
Yes, because you don't know
yeah,
how to love. How will you be able to love other
yeah,
people? You don't have your
yeah.
own definition, concept of it, right? In addition to what RuPaul said, I also wanted to share a quotation by Victor Hugo, and Les Miserables. To
Mhm.
love is to see the face of God.
There you go. That's the intersection. That's it. There it
Thank
is.
you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Jace.
so much, Glow, for your honesty statement. And thank you so much for your time. Thank you for sharing your story to the world, the universe again, rather. Thank you for sharing how authentic you are, not just to Boderanians, but to all the people who are watching right now. And I'm sure that whoever is able to see you, to watch you, whoever is able to witness what you're doing or how you're doing right now, they are proud of you. They're happy wherever you are and whoever you are right now.
Thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the space, and thank you for taking the time through this conversation.
Thank you, Glow. Everyone, Glow's story shows that our self perception is still heavily influenced by the environments we are in. But we do have the agency to go beyond the boundaries that these spaces created, making your faith your own. It was important for Glow to recognize that life is a spectrum and that empowered her to process her spirituality and embrace her authenticity. Oftentimes, our LGBTQ friends would be stuck in the dilemma of choosing between faith and self expression. Glow's experience showed that there are a lot of in betweens to pursue. The road to acceptance starts with yourself, and you have to respect your peace and your process. Your authentic self is a manifestation of self love. Claim that. And also advocate, celebrate for your wins, small, big, and in betweens. I'm your host, Jace De La Cruz. This has been Honesty Hour, a Boulder Pride special, always reminding you love wins.